hours and all sorts of terrible things happened because they were all trying to get their photograph with animals. And so, this is what we should do now. Mayoral campaigns now are no fun at all. And so this is getting up the mayoral campaign headquarters for Piglet, courtesy of the court order from the council telling us we had to do it. I mean, if you're going to build, the main thing is have fun. Don't kid yourself. So this is the building that we built in ATS Square, 24 hours, September, middle of winter, and all this, I mean, I've told you this story again, but my bright occasion was the student who picks up this thing and says, "What's this?" And it was a hammer, and I suddenly thought, this is going to be a long week. I mean, there's some things I really don't want to think about. And so, out of that anyhow, and so the story really goes on getting downhill from there, because what we ended up with, we had this brilliant head of department. When he was 3 years old, he managed to get on a ferry in Devonport, and they found him on this ferry, so they took him up to the wheelhouse, and they did the round trip walk, and then when they got back to Devonport, they deposited this 3-year-old with his very distraught parents who thought he'd been lost in the tide somewhere. And the thing is, that was the most exciting thing that he ever did. Now, from there on, his life just went downhill to conformity. And we then got with this process where I wanted to knock this up, and he said, "You've got to have a permit." And I said, "What do you want a permit for?" And he said, "Well, all buildings have got to have permits." And I said, "Look, we're only going to be down at ATS Square for a week. The police are going to take the week to evict us. We're going to go anyhow. Why do we need a permit? We can just have fun for a week with the police and quit it." But he wouldn't buy this. So the finish, I pulled out an envelope and I put 4 lines in the envelope, 2 dimensions, and he disappeared off to council. And when he got down to council, of course, they looked at this envelope with 4 lines on it, and they said, "Are you serious, buddy? Do you want a permit with this?" Oh, you can imagine the impact that has. And then they said, "Where's this from?" And he said, "Tony Watkins." "Oh," they said, "that's okay." Stamp. He arrived back with this envelope so packed with signatures and stamps, and he said, "We got a permit, Tony." And so from there we carried on, we booked this thing. And so, but that's all just the lead. And what I really want to deal with tonight is it wasn't quite as simple as that, because the story, I tell that much of the story, but there is actually another story, if I project it on a little bit, which is, I gave all the students an A+ grade. That would seem to you to be pretty straightforward. Oh, I thought it was pretty straightforward. And this head of department launched an inquiry, because he said, in this university, some students fail, some students pass, and there is a bell curve of grades, and that's what you do. And I said, "Well, it might be what you do, but it isn't what I do." So this went up and up through the university. It was really getting, one of the things, if you're going to bring about change, you've got to take it right up to the wire. Don't flinch. And so if you can imagine, the ultimate was, and it's one of my distinct memories, I was looking down this long, polished mahogany table, around which were the professors to decide to fire me from the university. And I thought, you get one crack at this, Tony. So I looked down the table and I said, there isn't a person sitting at this table who could do what my students have done. And one by one, those professors got up and left. And my students got their A+ grade. And gee, after that, I had to have a rough ride around the university. That's another story. So the point of this impact here is that that's the city council in the distance, hiding in their building, and here's Piglet out in the open enjoying life. And so this is the story of that one. And so then we move on to, and I'm just giving you a couple of stories, we could tell you endlessly, but there's a point behind these which I want to make, which is about how power operates. Because if you don't think about how power operates, and you don't think about, therefore, how, this is what we might call soft corruption. I'm not talking about anything wrong with any of these people. I'm merely talking about they work within their perception of life. And my contention would be, right at the moment, that perception is not enough. We've got to actually stretch it, or we as a human species don't have a future. It's pretty simple. So, in this case, if you can imagine a staff meeting and they say, now, will anybody here volunteer to work with the students to produce something for the Institute of, this is the Planning Institute conference down in Hamilton, and everybody else sort of thought, how much money is in this? And there was no money in it, of course, so nobody put their hand up. So I thought, oh, I'll put my hand up, and you could hear the groan around the staff. It was all a bit much. So anyhow, I knocked out, and I said to the students, okay, we're going to do this for Hamilton. Now, first thing, we're not going to get muddled up at the university. So we went out to Glen Innes and we took ourselves one of those little units, factory units, and we moved in there, we moved in a band, and we moved in, they brought all their kids and everything else, and we started a party, and so we partied madly, and we built in between party, and all their friends came, and grandparents, and it was just a marvellous event. And then at the end of that, in the middle of the night, we bundled this whole thing up onto a trailer, and we loaded it off down to Hamilton to the conference the students built it. The idea was it was a SARS shed. That was just the time when the whole country here was terrified that SARS might take off, and the hospitals clearly couldn't handle it. So what do? Well, the obvious thing to do was you build a little sleep out where you can take the person in your family who's got SARS, they go into the sleep out, you can look after them, you deal with the infection and cross-infection issues so that they're in an isolation ward, but they're right next door to all their familiar things, all their help, so it's a maximum healing environment. Pretty simple idea. Students really got it, and needless to say, university didn't get it, particularly the head of department didn't get it, so we end up down at Hamilton, and the head of department refused to even go and see the student work. Now I find that unbelievable, that anybody running a university department could actually refuse to see the student work. The students, of course, by this stage they've been training under me for a few weeks at least, so they're pretty clear about the situation. They said, up your conference. So they went off to the Hamilton camping ground and partied for 3 days during the conference. It was a party to remember. I promised the students never to show the photographs to anyone. No, that's something else. So I won't tell you more about the party, but I just mean that how do you end up with an attitude like this? Because what happened then was the students brought this back to the university, of course, and that head of department said, I don't know why they brought it back here. For me, that said everything I needed to know about architecture. Because what she didn't understand was the students loved it. They had built it themselves. They had done every bit of it. I mean, the turning point in this project was when the students rolled into Cracker Bay and said, what do we do now, Tony? And I said, well, don't ask me, it's your project. And they sat there. I suddenly thought, you mean you're not going to help us? I said, that's your project. Look, yeah, go for it. I'll sort it out if you're in real trouble, but don't expect me to be here feeding you all the information. So by the time they had this up, it wasn't my telling them what to do. It was them taking a grip on their life and saying, we've got an issue, we're going to put up a building, we're going to make it, we're going to do it, and it belonged to them. And gee, the tension between the students and the head of department was pretty severe. Wow. A lot of the time by university the air was livid and blue. And so then you go to, they get better and better, and this is one which you don't tell outside this room, but it's really such a funny story that I thought I'd share it tonight. Plus I'm getting older, it's like deathbed confessions, you see. So it's not a deathbed confession. This is one where I wanted to go off to Barcelona to the UAA Congress, the one which John was mentioning, International Union of Architects. And of course the university said, oh no, this is not an academic conference, no, we can't provide money for that, no, we can't provide money for that, no, we can't help you. And then I said, look, forget it. So I just bought a ticket and I headed off. Well, that's okay, except then I discovered that the head of, but this is another head of, these are 3 different head of departments, they're not the same person. And so another head of department bought himself a ticket, but not actually to London, not to Barcelona, but to London, where his daughter was. He wanted to go and see his daughter. But he had to stop over in Barcelona on the way, so that was really great. So he stops off in Barcelona. The Spaniards are pretty cunning. They knew all about people from New Zealand who just wanted to move up the academic ladder. So they had a hall across the other side of town, so they shipped him off the other side of town. He presented his paper to this empty hall, and then as he left, they presented him with this wonderful certificate which he could take back to the university and get a raise in salary. So that was all pretty good. So he heads off to London without going to the conferences. All is well until I come back to New Zealand. This notice goes up on the architecture wall saying that this particular head of department is going to give a lecture about the UAA Congress in Barcelona. I thought, gee, that's going to be interesting. He wasn't even there. And so I thought, well, go along anyhow. And I went along, and it was the most fantastic lecture. It was an incredible, it was really worthwhile hearing twice. The first time I heard it was in Barcelona when the author actually gave it. He was an urban designer wizzo in Barcelona, and he gave this fantastic lecture. And you had the opportunity to hear it again in Auckland. And now you would say, surely you blew this guy out of the water. Well, no, I mean, nobody would believe you, would they? I mean, stories like that I don't know what everybody else's life is like, but in my life I keep coming up with stories which really you think, I don't get this. What's going on in life? This is not real. Well, it was kind of real because that's actually the way it happened. So he took the trip to borrow a lecture, and that was it, and he moves up. So then we come to this. I'm just giving you an array of examples here because they're kind of fun because it sets this pattern for power and how it's used and how it might be used. So in this case, my favourite thing is vernacular architecture, as any of you know. And so this is, it's actually a house I stayed in. I had a choice up in Japan. This is way back in '64. And I had a choice of either I could go to the Olympic Games or I could stay here. Well, no choice really, I stayed here. I mean, it was fantastic. There were always going to be more Olympic Games, but the chance to stay here was a once in a lifetime event. And so you end up with all these amazing vernacular architecture, like this is the real stuff. People doing it themselves, building it themselves, whatever is there, no permits, no regulations, nothing. And they end up with all these beautiful things which architects then spend all their cash to go over and see for their holidays. Somebody ought to make the connection, but they don't. And so you end up with something like this in China, like